So we're just going to get right into this article because it might be the single most remarkable article to come out over the course of this entire conflict. The only other one I think is close is the one about the CIA and MI6 involvement in Ukraine that the New York Times published. So let's just get right into this. Now, this comes from far right pro Russian news source Politico. So you know it's going to have a slant in a Russian direction. And this article, let's just look at the first part of it. Ukraine is at great risk of its front lines collapsing. According to high ranking Ukrainian officers, the military picture is grim, and Russian generals could find success wherever they decide to focus their upcoming offensive. So, already, this is completely counter to the narrative you're seeing pretty much everywhere else. I mean, Blinken came out and said Ukraine is going to join NATO today. Business Insider came out and said Ukraine's winning. The only thing that can defeat us now is Russian misinformation and Russian bots. Finland signed a mutual defense pact with Ukraine. Everybody's saying that things are going great. We just have to get the 61 billion. If we get the 61 billion passed and we steal the 300 billion in Russian frozen assets, then Ukraine's going to win this war. They're already winning, but they'll win even more. And here we just immediately have, yeah, it's bleak. The war's lost. It's a disaster. We're getting what I would personally consider to be honesty for the first time in a long time. And I would almost call this like the mother of all Snakenings, or the Snakening Supreme if we want to make it more like a Marvel movie. But this is them just 100% throwing Ukraine under the bus. And it's not just throwing Ukraine under the bus, it's them throwing themselves under the bus. And we'll see this as we get through this. But this is so tonally different from what we've been seeing. It is kind of shocking. So, Zelensky's warnings are okay, so, Kiev. Wayward entrepreneur Elon Musk's latest pronouncements regarding the war in Ukraine set teeth on edge. He warned that even though Moscow has no chance of conquering all of Ukraine, the longer the war goes on, the more territory Russia will gain until they hit the Dnieper, which is tough to overcome. However, if the war lasts long enough, Odysee will fall too, he cautioned. Now, that's an open question. I kind of feel by the time they reach the Dnieper, Ukraine's just dead. Like, I don't know how much they realistically can do to defend the other half of the country, since I think most of their population's in the east. Definitely almost all of their industry is in the east. With a history of urging Ukraine to agree to territorial concessions and his opposition to the 61 billion US military aid package snarled on Capitol Hill amid partisan wrangling, Musk isn't Ukraine's favorite commentator, to say the least, and his remarks received predictable pushback. But the billionaires' entrepreneurs' forecast isn't actually all that different from the dire warnings Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky made in the last few days. And once again, when we talk about Zelensky, I think we covered this in like his bunker speech. They were talking about how they were gaining ground, or they were launching counterattacks, how Ukraine's only lost 31,000 dudes over the course of this entire conflict. According to Zelensky, unless the stalled multi-billion-dollar package is approved soon, his forces will have to go back, retreat step by step in small steps. He also warned that some major cities could be at risk of falling, specifically Kharkov. The Russians have been just bombing the entire area around Kharkov. Its power's shut down. I think a lot of the bridges that would be used to resupply it have been destroyed. They can basically attack Kharkov whenever they want. It's going to be a brutal fight, but the situation is really bad there. Obviously, Zelensky's warnings are part of a broad diplomatic effort to free up the military aid his forces so desperately need and have been short of for months. I thought that they weren't short of anything. See, this is the narrative. This is partially why I call it Schrodinger's War. You can find an equal number of articles saying that Ukraine is outgunning Russia, that they have more resources, that Russia's out of missiles, that Russian troops are using shovels, that their economy's in tatters, that they're using chips from washing machines, and that Ukraine is like desperately out of everything and needs more money. And you will get these two narratives often from the same publication, often in the same article. Everything from 155 millimeter artillery shells to Patriot air defense systems and drones. But the sad truth is, even if the aid package is approved by Congress, a massive resupply may not be enough to prevent a major battlefield upset. Once again, this is remarkable. Like, because we've been hearing for weeks now that if only the 61 billion gets passed, then Ukraine is going to win. And we have this article in Politico of all places saying, no, it probably doesn't even matter at this point in time. We can pass the money. Money is not going to help this conflict. And once again, this is what a lot of the like quote unquote pro-Russian disinformation agents have been saying for the last year or so when they talk about military production and shell numbers and kind of the guts of war. They've been just said that they were disinformation agents and they were mentally ill. But now we have Politico saying, yeah. And such a setback, especially in the middle of election campaigns in America and Europe, could very well revive Western pressure for negotiations that would obviously favor Russia, leaving the Kremlin free to revive the conflict at a future time of its choosing. So here we're back to the hopium here for a minute. So the worst thing that could happen is that the conflict gets freezed along the current front lines, and then Russia restarts this later on. And once again, this is like wildly optimistic. Why would Russia stop? Why would they like just keep what they have? They're winning. They're winning in the front lines on the verge of collapsing, and they've spent all this money to build up this massive army and all these missiles and all these glide bombs. So there's no reason for them to stop now. Like, there's no reason for them to freeze the conflict. But this is like they're still under the delusion that that's the worst thing that's going to happen, is that maybe Kherson and Zaporozhye will be occupied, but nothing worse than that. Essentially, everything depends now on where Russia will decide to target its strength in an offensive that's expected to launch this summer. In a pre-offensive pummeling stretching from Kharkov and Sumy in the north to Odessa in the south, Russia's missile and drone strikes have wildly surged in recent weeks, targeting infrastructure and making it hard to guess where it will mount its major push. Once again, if you look at most Western and Ukrainian sources, they will say that they shoot down like 90 to 100% of the missiles fired. They will say that like Russia didn't hit anything, that all this stuff has been shut down. Apparently, it also came out that the Ukrainians were using interceptor missiles against drones, which is another questionable thing. But I just want to point out here, like the contrast between the Ukrainian offensive and this supposed Russian offensive. Like the fact that they're even asking the question of where the offensive is going to come indicates that Russia did a better job with its OPSEC. The fact that no one knows where or when it's going to happen, and that they've been launching strikes all over the place to keep their enemies guessing, shows just how much more serious and adult they are. Like, is Russia going to put out a trailer like 2 weeks in advance? Are they going to announce where the attack's going to go 6 months in advance to give their opponents time to fortify a very specific area? No, we don't even know if they're going to launch an attack in the summer. The attack could come next week. It might not even come this year. We really have no idea. Russia's been a complete black box. The army doesn't say anything. The army only reports on things after they're over, and it's mostly just to confirm facts that people have gotten from elsewhere. But no, they're just firing everywhere. So it's funny that this is novel. I think that says something, and this is once again why I call it the Ukraine cinematic universe, because these aren't serious people. These aren't adults. Like, it's I don't know, just releasing a trailer. According to high-ranking Ukrainian military officers who served under General Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces until he was replaced in February, the military picture is grim. Or rather, appointed ambassador to the UK. Now, I've heard speculation that Zaluzhny was the guy, or one of the guys who went beyond this, who was behind this, and he has done this in the past. There's a number of pro-Zaluzhny Telegram channels that a lot of people think he directly runs, and that he's in the habit of going behind everyone's back and talking to the media under the condition of anonymity. The officers said there's a great risk of the front lines collapsing wherever Russian generals decide to focus their offensive. Moreover, thanks to a greater weight in numbers and the guided aerial bombs that have been smashing Ukrainians' positions for weeks now, Russia will likely be able to penetrate the front line and to crash it in some parts. So, once again, this we're seeing like what I consider to be honesty based on if you looked at any of the actual production numbers or any of the actual statistical information. But we're now they're saying that Russia is hitting things because I think they claimed that they were shooting down like hypersonic missiles and stuff like that. Um, so it's they're saying not only is the situation bad, but Russia has more tanks, greater weight in numbers. Because we keep hearing, like, once again, there was the article that 91% of the pre war Russian army died, that they've lost like 90% of their tanks and stuff. And now here they're just openly admitting, no, that was all wrong. No, we lied about all of that. Maybe I'm digging a bit deep into this, but this whole article is so counter to everything else that Politico and other people have said. I think it's not unfair for me to say that this is basically them admitting that they lied about everything. I don't really know how else to put it. They spoke on the condition of anonymity to speak freely. There's nothing that can help Ukraine now because there are no serious technologies able to compensate Ukraine for the large mass of troops Russia is likely to hurl at us. We don't have those technologies, and the West doesn't have them in sufficient numbers. One of the top-ranking military sources told Politico. So you just say like the wonder weapons, the wonder weapons aren't enough. Like they're saying here, the attack, like Zelensky keeps talking about the Tauruses and the ATACMs and the F-16s and all this other stuff, and they're just openly admitting here, yeah, they don't have anything. We don't have anything that can shoot down hypersonic missiles. We don't have anything that can stop the glide bombs, and even whatever they have, there's not enough of them to be useful. And once again, the entire narrative, and I stress this again, is that if we pass the 61 billion, somehow money will solve this problem. The issue isn't money. It's never been about money. The issue is if there's nothing to buy with the money, it doesn't matter. If a man has 10 apples for sale in his store, it doesn't matter if you give him $10 or $10,000 or $10 million. The most that you can possibly buy is those 10 apples, and that's the issue here. The US could give Ukraine trillions of dollars. They could give them like a quadrillion dollars, and it doesn't really matter. Now, it'll help certain things. It'll keep the Ukrainian government financially solvent, which is important. But in terms of military, it's not very helpful. According to him, it is only Ukrainian grit and resilience, as well as errors by Russian commanders, that may now alter the grim dynamics. Okay, so once again, this is something we got at the end of World War II with Hitler, with Japan, that human will is somehow going to turn this whole thing around. That the will of the Ukrainian people is so great, they're just going to somehow able to do it. Or the Russian commanders are going to do something so monumentally stupid that it's going to completely reverse the war. Now, Russia catastrophically miscalculated at the start of this war. We've been over this many times. But since then, or for the last like year and a half, I think Russia's been making pretty sane, very conservative, very sensible military decisions. Like Bakhmut went okay. Avdiivka went very well. Is the current Russian army, the Russian army of 2024, going to do something so monumentally retarded that they lose the war? I just can't see that happening, especially not when their current strategy of just gradually rolling forward. We have this narrative about this mistake. So whereas other articles prior to this one would have said, yeah, that's definitely going to happen. Once again, the entire basis of the Ukrainian counteroffensive was that the Russian soldiers were going to run away. They decide to be honest. However, the high-ranking Ukrainian officers reminded that relying on Russian errors is not a strategy. And they were bitter about the missteps they say hamstrung Ukraine's resistance from the start, missteps made by both the West and Ukraine. They were also scathing about Western foot dragging, saying supplies and weapon systems came too late and in insufficient numbers to make the difference they otherwise could have had. Well, I mean, Victoria Nuland and like the media department of the White House planned the counteroffensive. So yeah, like Zelensky, I remember on that one Zelensky, who I do think is incompetent, but he actually like sort of knew what was going on. But like Newland and the White House just basically forced Ukraine to do the YOLO offensive that went nowhere. Zelensky, who is in no way the person who they're interviewing for this, used to call it the war of one chance. By that he meant weapon systems became redundant very quickly because they're quickly countered by the Russians. For example, we used Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles supplied by Britain and France successfully, but just for a short time. The Russians are always studying. They don't give us a second chance. And they're successful in this. So once again, we have this admission, I think for the first time, that like the Russians aren't like retards. Like they aren't mouth drooling like losers who have no idea what they're doing. He's saying, yeah, no, they know what they're doing. They've learned. When we roll something out, they adapt to it. They adapt to it. They come up with a way to counter it. They're very cunning. They're very good at, and because of their industrial and techno and just advantage of having their own defense industry, it's very easy for them to in a short time build something specifically to counter it. So like I said, this is a very big difference. Don't believe the hype about them just throwing troops into the meat grinder to be slaughtered, he added. They do that too, of course, maximizing even more the impact of their superior numbers. But they also learned and refined. The officer said the shoulder-fired anti-tank missiles supplied by the UK and US in the first week of the invasion came in time, helping them save Kiev, and so too did the HIMARS, which were used to great effect, enabling them to push Russia out of Kherson in November 2022. But often we don't get the weapon systems at the time we need them. They come when they're no longer relevant, another senior officer said. Citing once again, we have this like what I think is a very fair evaluation of the weapon systems they've got. Yeah, the anti tank missiles blew up a lot of Russian tanks in the first couple weeks. That did help out. I'm not sure how much the HIMARS actually helped out, but they were actually useful. And they're just like once again they're being honest. They're giving this sober, calm, measured evaluation of things without like them just screaming Russia bad, Putin evil, he's Putler. They're just doing meat wave assaults. The F-16 fighter jets, as an example, a dozen or so F-16s are expected to be operational this summer after basic pilot training has been completed. Every weapon has its own right time. F-16s were needed in 2023. They won't be right for 2024. And that's because, according to this officer, Russia is ready to counter them. Once again, we're acknowledging that there's another side in this war. That, like, the Russians aren't just drooling retards. That they can like read the newspapers, and when America announces, oh, we're going to be delivering X fighters with X specifications at X time, then they're like, maybe we should come up with a plan to counter that. And once again, people have this idea that surprise is impossible in the modern era, but I don't like. Once again, even if that is true, why would you make it easy? Why are you giving exact dates? Why are you trying to do some misinformation? In the last few months, we started to notice missiles being fired by the Russians from northern Crimea, but without the explosive warhead. We couldn't understand what they were doing, and then we figured it out. They're range finding, he said. The officer explained that Russia has been calculating where to best deploy its S-400 missile and radar systems in order to maximize the area it can cover to target the F-16s, keeping them away from the front lines in Russia's logistic hubs. So once again, we have an acknowledgement that like the Russians aren't completely stupid. and an acknowledgement that they have air defenses and that their air defenses work pretty well and that they're good at using them. And there's a basic acknowledgement that your opponent is even active in the game that I haven't seen really before this. The officer said they now need more basic traditional weapons as well as drones. We need howitzers, shells, hundreds of thousands of shells and rockets, one of them told Politico. Estimating Ukraine needed 4 million shells and 2 million drones. We told the Western partners all the time that we have the combat experience. No, you don't. We have the battlefield understanding of this war. They have the resources and they need to give us what they need. Yeah, but they don't. The 4 million shells don't exist. I don't even know if collectively the US and Europe has 4 billion shells. If you were to empty out all of their like personal private reserves, if they would even have enough for that. The EU is maybe going to be able to supply 1 million drones by the end of the year. Europe, for its part, is trying to help Ukraine make up for its colossal disadvantage in artillery shells. Once again, we've been told repeatedly Russia's out of artillery shells. Russia's buying them from North Korea. Russia's buying them from Iran. They're getting outgunned by the Ukrainians, and now they're just completely admitting that that was not the case. And in this regard, a proposed Czech-led bulk artillery ammunition purchase could bring Ukraine's total from both within and outside the EU to 1.5 million rounds at a cost of 3.3 billion, but that's still short of what it needs. I don't think they're going to get that many. Now, there's been a lot of debates as to how many they've actually received. The EU said 500,000, said initially they were going to give them 1 million, then it was 500,000, then Zelensky said it was only like 300,000. So we have no idea. And once again, I just want to point out this idea of buying like artillery shells off of the international arms market from like shady dudes in the Middle East and Africa probably is not a good idea. The officers emphasized they need many, many more men too. The country doesn't have enough men on the front lines, and this is compounding the problem of underwhelming Western support. However, Ukraine is yet to pull the trigger. And once again, I said I wouldn't do a field trip, but we're just going to do a brief field trip. According to the BBC, on February 25th, so less than 2 months ago, Zelensky said that Ukraine has lost 31,000 troops killed since the start of Russia's invasion. So just once again, he said this, and the Western media just was like, "Cool, that's neat." Even though the Americans' own estimate was way higher than that, how can Ukraine be running out of soldiers if what Zelensky said was accurate? I mean, the only takeaway you could have is that he just lied, and he lied blatantly, and he lied massively to like the entire face of the entire public, and to his Western backers. Like, why would you take this man seriously? Like, why if he's willing to do such a childish, pathetic lie? I don't know. And once again, it's just been memory hold. Like, Zelensky can say something like that. That's obviously a lie and obviously isn't true. And the Western media will publish it, and there will be no accountability. Who fact-checked this? Did anyone fucking fact-check this? No, these fucking F-slurs, they don't fact-check anything. They just live in their bubble, and they commit the crime of killing the truth. They have no commitment to the truth, no commitment to reality. They're scum. Fuck journalists. Sorry, it just makes me angry. And once again, this isn't even about like what side of this war you're on. This is about the pieces of shit in the media who claim to be the underdog, claim to be on the side of truth, claim to speak truth to power, who have these G-slur, passive-aggressive, fact-check, and they're just... It's so bad. It's true what Thomas Aquinas said, the greatest sin is pride, but I'll get back on this. The officer emphasized, okay, let's see here. Russia, as authorities are worried that the political fallout without mobilization measures, amid draft dodging, and avoidance of conscription papers, So they have not been able to increase the draft in the last couple months. The hardliners want the war to continue, but they don't want to increase conscription. So I don't really know how that worked out. So last week, Sersky abruptly announced Ukraine doesn't need as many fresh troops. After review, the figure has been significantly reduced, and we expect that we will have enough people capable of defending their motherland. I am not only talking about mobilized but also volunteer fighters. So Russia, by their estimate, and you can believe them or disbelieve them, approximately 1,200 Russian men sign up every day to serve in the SMO. And in the aftermath of the Crocus Hall shooting, I think something like 10,000 more Russians signed up. Like, the numbers aren't getting better, and I'll say this again. So they're saying after an intensive 3 to 4 months training, so they're getting 3 to 4 months training. Now, I have been over this many times. The BBC did an article on this. They are not getting that much training. In some cases, they're giving them 3 days training. Russian soldiers are getting a year training, the full year training. That's partially why they haven't done an offensive yet, because they don't want to send men in without adequate training. And these assholes are just going to send, well, they've sent a generation of Ukrainian men to die based on lies like 31,000 dudes have died. Like, this is the man that they're dying for. This is the man who is making the decisions regarding their life or deaths. This man who wouldn't let them surrender at Avdiivka. This man who did the counteroffensive that was obviously a bad idea, and he made tens of thousands of brave men run into fucking minefields for nothing, just because he's an actor who wants to be like look cool on TV, and that F-slur Biden, who also wanted him to do this. None of these people are all evil. Like, you can say the Russians are evil, and that there's a fair there's a fair argument to be made there. But at the end of the day, the Russians are the enemy to the Ukrainians. The Russians are invading their country. They're their enemy. You expect your enemy to shoot at you. You expect your enemy to shell you. You don't expect your fucking president and your allies to screw you over this way and to just lie. The plan is to move as many desk-bound uniformed personnel as possible. Okay, play along with narrative from politicians. Zelensky signed an additional parts to an old mobilization law, tightening the legal requirements for draft age Ukrainian men to register their details, lowering the minimum age for call up from 27 to 25. It's irrelevant. Like, there isn't that many. And that is, Ukraine has almost no young people to begin with. So they're going to throw the remaining young males, what's left of their future, into the meat grinder in this hopeless battle. Like, dude, just surrender. Just ask for terms. The Russian, you might think that it's going to suck to be governed by the Russians, but Russia ultimately will want to rule the parts of the country it takes. I don't think they're going to ethnically cleanse people. I think they're going to rebuild them. You might not want to live under Russian rule, but at least you can live. And maybe someday you can get your independence again. I mean, by their own narrative, Ukraine was subject to Russia like for 300 years or however long it was, and then it became independent. Well, maybe in 30 years you can regain your independence and take, like, it's not worth it. Like, you have a choice now, and it's a simple one. Do you submit to Russia and try to rebuild, and hopefully things will change in the future, as they always do, and you can maybe try again? Or do you just let your entire race get wiped out, your country bombed into cinders, just so Zelensky can look cool on TV and Darkside Brandon can win re-election? Because that's what these men are dying for Zelensky to look cool and for Biden to win re-election. Russia is now gathering resources and will be ready to launch a big attack around August, maybe sooner. So Elon may not be too wide of the mark after all. So this is the article. This is the ultimate snakening. This is them basically admitting, and I went over it and I gave examples that everything that they have been saying, including Politico, including Newsweek, including New York Times, all these fucking assholes, is a lie, and it was a massive lie, and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians died because they were sold this bill of goods. They were told they were winning the war. They were told that they could beat Russia, that they were winning, and they were just sent they were just sent to the slaughter. They just keep mobilizing people. You know what else is just? It's very disrespectful to deny the sacrifice of all those men who died by saying 31,000 dudes went down. Like it is. It's a really sick thing to do. And once again, there was no need to lie. Zelensky could have just said, look, we've lost a lot of men, but it's not appropriate for me to give out information about our casualty numbers. Like that makes sense. Like, why would you give out information like that in a public sector? But no, he had to lie about it. This is probably Zaluzhny. We have, I didn't even see that. That is really dark. The little teddy bear there. And they admit like the 61 billion doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. The F-16s don't matter. We're basically fucked. And yet once again, like is there a solution presented here? There's no solution. There's no suggestion of what to do. Once again, we can't negotiate with Russia. So, like, what is it that these Ukrainian army officers want them to do? Because they admit that the money's not going to do anything. They admit that the military equipment doesn't even physically exist, even if all the money could get passed. They don't have the manpower. There's no political way to do further conscription. And Russia can basically attack at will now. And once they attack, they're just going to roll through and crush everything in its path. So what is it that they want? There's no solution. It's not even saying like surrender or negotiate. Now, France, and I'll end this video because I don't want to get too long, reached out to Russia and they're like, could we maybe go back to the 2022 Istanbul agreement? And Russia's like, no, we're winning. We aren't going to stop just because you guys are losing. And you rejected a deal when the war was on more even terms. We aren't going to just give up because, like, you guys completely failed. But there's not going to be that. None of these people have a stop. It's just going to keep going on, and more people are going to die. So Joe Brandon can get reelected. And so Zelensky can look cool and stuff like that. And the Western public doesn't care. They're all pieces of shit too. They don't care about Ukrainians dying. You got all those assholes in the U.S. Congress who are like, "Oh, this is a good deal because we're getting Ukrainians to die and kill Russians." Like, these people are fucked. They're all fucked. I like. You can say I'm fucked for making fun of this and calling this the Ukraine cinematic universe and comparing it to movies. But that's how these people think. They don't get that these are young men with lives, with families, with girlfriends, with wives, with children, with parents who love them. They just view this as like the end of Saving Private Ryan or something, where they're just going up onto D-Day. And everybody makes it out and everybody goes home. And if people die, they die in like some glorious death scene with like music playing in the background and just the horrific slaughter that this war has degenerated into. And it's like, it's one thing to keep fighting if you're able to put up a fight, but I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to. Russia has air supremacy at this point in time, and they can just launch as many airstrikes as they want whenever they want, and Ukraine can't do anything about it. It's gone from being near peer, near equal to slight advantage to Russia to overwhelming advantage to Russia. And at this point in time, the longer it goes on, the more horrendous the slaughter is going to get. But once again, Joe Brandon doesn't care. Zelensky doesn't care. Syrskyi doesn't care. None of these people care, because all of these people are sociopaths, and they should be in jail for war crimes. And those are the people who lead you. And ultimately, I can't help but think these are the people we deserve. because we're the ones who go along with this. We're the ones who keep electing them. We're the ones who talk about the current thing and stuff like that. So sorry if this is kind of a downer, but I don't really know what else to say. It's just gross. But so God bless everybody. Please pray for an end to this conflict. That somebody will see reason and ask for terms from Russia. But no, we're gonna fight to the last Ukrainian.